Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel, and this is the first show of May 2nd, 2016. It's already one-third of the way through 2016, month by month, getting closer to November. That's what we talk about every day on this show, right? What's going to happen in November? Well, it's getting here closer and closer and closer. And it's going to be here before you know it. No matter who gets the nomination on either side and all the drama that goes on, it's going to get here fairly quickly. It's just amazing. I was up in Clearwater this weekend watching a disc golf tournament. And it's amazing to me that I haven't thrown a disc since the beginning of January. I've taken a step back. I've been doing other things. There's a part of me that feels a little guilty thinking about going out and throwing when I know that there are important things I need to be doing back here at my apartment regarding the show, regarding my writing, and some other things. And, of course, I've told you about my new show that's going to be starting. Very excited about that. And the time just flies. It doesn't even seem like it's been 4 months, almost 4 months since I threw a disc the last time. So, just funny how those things work. Just really, really strange. And is it a factor that I'm getting older? I don't think so. Some people say, man, as you get older, days just seem to fly right by. I don't know. I can remember a lot of summers when I was a teenager into my early 20s between years of high school or years of college that seemed to go pretty fast. So, I don't know. Don't know. But I do want to start with a conversation because we got a lot to talk about today, and I know I'm not going to get to all of it. Only got an hour. But I was up there and I saw a guy. I'm friends with him. I wouldn't say we're close friends or anything, but I run into him at these disc golf tournaments. And I just want you to know, for the record, he is a good guy. All right? Not conservative, from what I can tell, but good guy. And he and I had this conversation real quickly because of some things that happened this past weekend. First of all, two decently well-known disc golfers in the St. Pete, Tampa area got killed this weekend. One was a motorcycle accident. He was riding with a woman on the back. I don't know if it was his wife, his girlfriend, I'm not sure. But a truck pulled in front of him. He laid the bike down. He smacked into the truck. The truck ran him over. And he got killed. The girl survived with injuries. I don't know how she's doing. From all intents and purposes, it was the person driving the truck's fault. Pulled right in front of him. Cut right in front of him. So he's going one way, the truck's coming the other way. The truck turns left right into the path of the motorcycle. In the other case, another disc golfer got killed down in St. Petersburg area near the Children's Hospital. And I don't know, at this point, looks like a road rage incident. So he was in his car, another car behind him, a guy jumped out, came out with a gun, shot this guy to death in his car while he was on the phone talking to his girlfriend. In both these cases, these guys are younger than I am. And so this guy that I ran into on Saturday, he and I are talking about those two occasions. We're talking about how dangerous motorcycles are. And I've voiced my opinion on how motorcycles... you look at, I know what I see here in Florida where motorcycles can be driven all year round. You see about half the time of the half of the motorcyclists you see, they're usually doing something they shouldn't be doing. Cutting through traffic, accelerating real fast from stoplights. And, what makes me crazy about motorcycles, and I used to ride motorcycles off-road, dirt bikes up in Pennsylvania and strip mines, things like that, is that accident that occurred this weekend where that disc golfer got killed could have been avoided if he was in a car. If a truck pulls in front of you, yes, there's going to be a wreck, but everybody's probably going to survive. And in fact, wreck probably doesn't happen because the truck probably sees the car coming, whereas motorcycles, a little harder to see. On the other hand, I know that just my driving around, I've been driving car for almost 30 years now, you see a lot more motorcyclists doing things they shouldn't be doing than you see with people in cars doing something they shouldn't be doing. See way more motorcyclists speeding, weaving through traffic, doing all sorts of stupid stuff compared to people who are driving cars. Just an observation. So I pointed this out, and somewhere out of the blue, and I'm trying to clear my voice here, somewhere out of the blue, this guy brings up guns. And I think the reason he did it is because I've been posting some of my target practice, going to the gun range and shooting. I've been posting some of that on Facebook, although I have not been to the gun range in a couple weeks. And he points out, and he just pulls it out of the blue that, I just want you to know, you say that motorcycles are dangerous, and I said that. He goes, well, that's the way I feel about guns, and I know you're into guns, but, I worry about, motorcycles being in the hands of the wrong people, but then guns being in the hands of the wrong people. All right? And I wasn't going to stand there and try to make a political argument with this guy. Once again, decent guy. All right? And I know that in his head, he is not making an outrageous statement. I think it's an outrageous statement, but I know he doesn't think it's an outrageous statement. And I know me standing there is not going to change his mind in the matter of 5 minutes. And you know what? As I've told you, I rarely talk about politics with people, especially in casual conversations. Even if they bring it up. Even if somebody brings it up, I just do not want to get into it. All right? Because I know I'm not going to change that person's mind. And they're not going to change my mind. And I know on all of these topics, I'm about 100% more knowledgeable than they are. And it's just basically a waste of time. Especially if somebody's going to pull something like that out of the blue. Now, it seemed like maybe it was relevant because one guy got killed with a gun. Another guy got killed riding a motorcycle. The problem that we have, and the point he is trying to make, I think, and like I said, this guy's not conservative, and I've seen other things that he's posted on Facebook. I know that he's not. I'm not saying he's some liberal kook, but just doesn't think like I do. He thinks that is a very well-intentioned position. The difference is it's easier to get a motorcycle license than it is to get a gun license or to buy a gun. Mm-hmm. You can have felonies on your record and buy a motorcycle. You can't do that for a gun, at least not here in Florida. And I think in most states. And I'm not even sure I agree with that, depending on what the felony is. Depending. But in any case, on top of that, we know that riding on the street, whether in a car or in a motorcycle, is more dangerous than being around guns. You know how I know that? Way more people are killed on the streets every year in the United States than are killed by guns. It's not even close. It's not even close. Most people don't realize that when they're out there driving their cars around, they are driving around weapons. Now, it's not how we think of cars. We think of them as transportation. We think of them as fashion statements. Climbing the corporate ladder, moving from a Honda to a Mercedes to an Aston Martin. That's how we think of cars. But cars are killing people every year. They're killing people by people driving them. But we don't think about taking cars out of people's hands if they're involved in a wreck where somebody's killed by accident. Right? Have to remember that. The other point he's trying to make, well, I don't want guns to get into the wrong. I know you love guns, but I know you're going to be responsible. But I'm worried about those people who aren't going to be responsible guns. How do you know that? How do you know that? Just within the last few days here in Pinellas County or nearby, we've had 2 murder-suicides committed by men who had no felony records. In one case, it was a guy who actually used to be a cop, became sort of financial advisor. He shot his wife, shot himself. They were in their late 60s, early 70s. In another case, it was a divorced man and wife getting together in a McDonald's to exchange, that's where they meet for the woman to drop the son off so the dad can pick him up, something like that. The guy showed up, shot his ex-wife, shot himself right in front of their son, who survived, was not shot. Now, I'm going to say in both of those cases, these men had these weapons for years, maybe decades. Had to fill out the paperwork like I did when I got my Glock 19 back in February. So how do you know who's going to use their guns for the wrong reasons and who do you know is going to use their guns for the right reasons? It's hard to tell. So you can't just break it down to who's good with guns and who isn't good with guns, because you just don't know. You can't make a prediction 50 years down the road or 40 years, or even 10 years, even 5 years. You don't know. That's part of the problem that, this guy, he brought it up, and as he's talking, I'm thinking this in my head. Yeah, well, how do you define that? We know how liberals would like to define it. If you're a conservative, you don't get a gun. That's how they'd like to define it, because they think we're kooks. They think on the basis that we don't believe in man-made climate change and man-made global warming or global cooling or whatever it's doing right now. On the basis of that, they think we're kooks, and because of that, we have psychological problems, and they'd like to take the guns out of our hands. You think I'm kidding? Some of them take it to the point, well, being that we can't know who is good with guns, well, just because we can't tell, then nobody should have guns. That's their reasoning. Now, I'm going to take for granted from this conversation with this guy that he doesn't own a gun. I didn't ask him. None of my business. None of my business. That people know that I own a gun. I've made sure that everybody does know that I own a gun. On purpose. It's different. I guess I'm a little bit different of a public figure than this guy is. So we were having this conversation, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you're right, but what about in the case of this disc golfer that got murdered? You can say that I don't know what kind of guy I never met him, knew his name. But when you start saying that nobody should own guns, you start opening up yourself to the point of, well, you're just waiting around for the government to come and take everybody's guns. Well, what's going to happen in the meantime, do you think? Crime is still going to happen. You're going to be waiting around. Well, we think that nobody should own guns. I'm going to turn my guns in. Well, some people are still going to have guns. A lot of kooky people are going to have guns. A lot of criminals are going to have guns. What situation does that put you in? And it has been pointed out before, there's a lot of people dying in the United States because of hammers and knives and strangulation these days, too. And cars. We're going to get rid of cars. So, once again, I'm sure this guy standing there thought that he was making the most reasonable argument in the world. He thought he was trying to make this correlation. Well, motorcycles are dangerous, but guns can be dangerous too. And I know you like guns, but I'm not worried about you. It's those other people who, well, I don't know how you determine that. I didn't own a gun until 3 people. I guess if you want to go a lot by time owned, I've only owned a gun for a few months. People should be nervous around me. Wouldn't you trust somebody that's owned a gun for 20 years more than somebody who just fired his first gun in January? But somehow he's telling me he thinks that I would be, I'm a good gun owner. I think I am a good gun owner. I think I am. But somebody else might say, this Ed Dentzel, he just has owned a gun for 3 months. Man, I'm going to just have to watch myself around him. He might drop his gun and it might go off. Of course, Glocks don't do that. But, I got to watch myself around him. Maybe he shouldn't own one. I don't know if I can trust him. You see how it gets so subjective. And I think the reason is, the reason that gun laws have been loosened in this country is because a lot of people have started to see through that. Have started to see through the gun arguments that people make, like this one. Once again, not a gun. This guy, I don't believe, is a gun, anti-gun kook. I don't believe that. Okay? But even these kinds of arguments that he was making seemed this reasonable argument when people have really sat down and thought about it. They think, that just doesn't make sense. How do you know what somebody's going to do somewhere down the road? It's like saying if somebody gets their driver's license at 16 and then when they're 43, they kill somebody drinking and driving. I don't know how you predict that. The 20-some years later, this person's going to be drinking and driving and kill somebody. I don't know. It's the same way with guns. This thing, only the reasonable people should be able to own guns. I don't know how what are we going to do? Test people every day? Well, you're psychologically fit to carry that gun today. See you tomorrow for your test again. The only answer is that people should be allowed to own weapons. And in fact, I would go as far to say that even some people who have committed felonies in the past, if it's white-collar felonies, check kiting, things like that, as long as it's not violent tendencies that go along with that some people have and they just happen to be out of jail now, I can understand that. But other people have ripped somebody off, maybe changed ways, but have never hurt anybody in their lives. I have no problem with those people owning guns. They have to defend themselves too. Their lives are not worth any less just because they needed somebody and ripped a business off by, stealing from the cash register. Whereas it's rape, robbery with a gun, you don't know how to use it. You've proven on paper, facts, history, that you don't know how to properly use a gun. You're going to use it to force people to do things, then yeah, you can't own one. But for other felonies, especially women, I'm all for them owning guns. Let's move on to something else. It was just a very interesting conversation. I hope I caught the essence of explaining this conversation. I'm talking about motorcycle safety, and then he automatically wants to go into gun safety because of this other guy getting killed, and then he brings me up in my gun ownership. Very interesting conversation that I had with this guy, and it went for like maybe 5 or 7 minutes, and like I said, I just stood there and nodded. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Let's move on to something else. Indiana, I got to tell you, it's going to be happening tomorrow. I have no idea what's going to happen there. No idea. The polls are all over the place. I saw one poll, Trump's up 15, and I saw another poll, Cruz is up 15. The aggregate is Trump by a few points, if you want to go by that. I guess the hard part about Indiana in polling that particular state, and we know that the polls have been all over the place. In pretty much all of these states, more and more people having cell phones. They don't want to answer them. And I have to be honest that here living here in Florida, that I don't know if somebody even tried to call me, a pollster even tried to call me in the days and weeks leading up to the Florida primary. So maybe they're not even trying to call people on cell phones anymore. I have no idea. But the other point about Indiana that makes it so tough is they have some sort of anti-telemarketing law. I didn't get into the specifics of it, but it sounds somewhat restrictive. That people can't be called at home to be sold stuff. I'm sure there's some loopholes here and there, but the pollsters are having problems because of that. You also have the issue when you get into this situation where it's tough to get a hold of people, get somebody on the phone, is the only people who are going to stand around and take the time to answer the pollsters' questions are those people who are really, really, really motivated. So that can skew the results. So I don't know what's going to happen. It does feel to me like tomorrow is a big deal. I know that maybe that you don't need to be a Mensa member to know that, to understand that. But this is definitely a crossroads. That if Trump wins by quite a bit, then it's like, well, it gets more than likely that he's going to get to that 1237 number. If Cruz wins, then Trump has no shot of getting to that 1237 number. All of these going back to Super Tuesday and the SEC primaries and here in Florida, and all of these things were big. And then, of course, New York and the Northeast primaries from last week, all big deals. But this is the one, it seems, where there's like a line drawn in the sand. That it's definitely this whole primary season is going to go one or two directions. It is either going to go, Trump is going to get to that number, or Cruz is going to stop him from getting that number. One of those things is almost for sure going to be a known fact after Indiana. It feels like it. Unless I'm totally getting baited into believing this. Because you do see some stories out there. It says that no matter what happens in Indiana tomorrow, Trump still isn't going to get to that 1237 number. So we're just going to have to see. What makes Indiana tough is that, I saw, was it at 538.com, the blog, or was it at redstate.com, the other red state? They were trying to draw a correlation between Indiana and what has gone on in the states around it. For example, what happened in the primary in Ohio? And we know what happened there, that Kasich won. And what happened in Michigan, what happened in Illinois, what happened in Wisconsin. These states, they're kind of around to try to get an idea. And the tough part about all of this, and in all of those states, only one poll got any of those states right. For the most part, those other four states, the pollsters weren't even close. In one, they underestimated Trump. Another one, they underestimated Kasich. Another one, they underestimated Cruz. And one, they kind of got right. All their averages put together. So from that, you can't even tell. What I think the problem is for Cruz, why this isn't ending up in a situation, I don't think it's going to be like Wisconsin, unfortunately, which is really kind of strange, being that Wisconsin is a little bit of a blue state. I mean, Wisconsin, electorally, regarding presidential campaigns, is not much different than some of those northeastern states. Not maybe like New York or New Jersey, but Wisconsin, it's a lot like New Hampshire. But in that case, Cruz won Wisconsin, but Trump won New Hampshire. It's what I brought up 2 months ago. some of these states. It's funny that Kansas goes for Trump or goes for Cruz, but Georgia goes for Trump. It's hard trying to figure out the demographics and why these states that seem to vote the same in presidential politics, when it comes to these primaries, they're going off in all these different directions. Very interesting. And the issue is with Indiana is that it was a reliable Republican state for a while. And then it went for Obama in 2008, but then came back to Republicans in 2012. Now, you would think this would be a state that Cruz would do well in, but it seems like it's close. Once again, seems. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. I don't know. The polls are all over the place. And when we started out this primary season, had somebody said that Ted Cruz is going to win Wisconsin, I think the normal thinking would have been, oh, well, then he's easily going to win Indiana. And that's not the way it's gone. It's just not the way it's gone. And likewise, if somebody would have said, well, you know, Cruz didn't win the popular vote in South Carolina, nor Alabama, nor Georgia, and all of those states, then they'd say, well, Cruz, I'm sure, had to drop out right after that. No, he's still around. It's just bizarre. It's just really bizarre. And once again, as I've said before, if you are a political scientist, there is no better time to be in that business than right now. Getting all of these facts and figures and polls and exit polls and all these focus groups and all these interviews and everything to put together some very, very interesting paper. And they're going to get to do a lot of speeches because of it. Michael Barone and the rest of them, what's that guy's name from University of Virginia? They're going to have wealth of information for years and years and years. No different than rocket scientists when we ended up going to the moon or going into space for the first time. They knew that they had their retirement wrapped up. As soon as the Americans put a guy in space, they knew, you know what, I'm going to have a job for the next 30 years and I don't have to worry about anything. This is the kind of thing that's happening in politics right now. On both sides, not just on the Republican side. We can't forget about the Democrats. That's proving to be interesting too. Very much like how what happened on the Democrat side in 1968 with everything that went on there. That generated a lot of work for a lot of political scientists and government majors for a couple decades as well. Same thing. And maybe you could say it's a little bit like 1992, not so much 96, but 1992 when Ross Perot jumped in. That also proved to be interesting for political scientists. Well, here we go. 2016, we got this going on once again. The problem I think that Ted Cruz is having in Indiana is that it's probably a little bit too much like those southern states. It's not like Ohio. It's not like Michigan. It's not like Wisconsin. In that it has been pretty much a Republican state. Whereas Ohio has gone Democrat the last couple times. And so you have more Republicans in Indiana, which means you have more people, it seems, that can be persuaded to vote for Donald Trump. I hate saying that. And so that factors into everything too. I think that whether it's an open or closed primary is a deciding factor as well. So I just don't know what's going to go on tomorrow. All I can tell you is if Trump wins, once again, just going to have to grin and bear it. Just going to have to grin and bear it. And just remember that these are your friends and neighbors who are voting for this guy. I know you don't like to think about it that way, But they are. I talk with my parents. They have friends of theirs, people in their 60s into their 70s, who my parents think are perfectly the finest people in the world. That's why they're friends with them. And they went and voted for Donald Trump, what was it, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, was it last week, in Pennsylvania. I don't know what to tell you. And there's nothing that my parents could ever say to them to change their minds, because both of my parents voted for Ted Cruz. Just the way it goes. These aren't some mystery, no-name people that are voting for this guy. These are people living right next door to you. Good luck with that. But I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And we are back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I have a big question. Let's move on to something else. I have a huge question for all of you. How is it that I missed the fact that the Correspondents' Dinner was going to be this weekend? How did I miss that? Because every year since I've been doing shows, podcasts about politics, I'm going to say for the last 5 or 6 years, that event has proven to be a target-rich environment. Now, I'm not going to go very long about it this time, because to be frank with you, I didn't watch any of it. Don't know what it was said. I know a lot of jokes were made. I'm sure they were horrible jokes. I'm sure that Barack Obama thought he was like the greatest, funniest guy in the room. And he made an idiot of himself and made fun of everybody. And my attitude with it, if you're new to the show, haven't listened to me before, haven't heard me talk about the Correspondents' Dinner that happens every year. It is what is wrong with everything about government and media in the United States. If you could just pick out one particular event, meeting, situation, story, it is that. I think I said maybe last year, the year before, I wouldn't be original now, but I've often said that you want to do the Correspondents' Dinner, fine. You want to televise it on C-SPAN or CNN or wherever you want to put it, fine. Let's just do a split screen with live, like a webcam, live web camera of military members sleeping in mud at the same time. Let's have a live cam somewhere where we can try and contrast between the movers and shakers in our society and the people who are really doing the real work. And just show what one of them are doing, getting dressed up in tuxes, fancy food, and these other people living in the mud. These one group over here laughing, chuckling it up, picking on each other like some Dean Martin roast. And these other people out here who we know many of them are going to have post-traumatic stress syndrome once they come home. Just contrast that. And when you put in a split screen, and that Correspondents' Dinner would come to an end right then. You would never see it again. I know some people have called it the nerd prom. It's worse than that. It's worse than that. When a bunch of people just get together to talk to each other about how great they all are. And wink, 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 nudge, nudge. I'm going to pick on you now. I'm going to make this fun of you about this joke. But afterwards, just remember we're friends. It is what is wrong with Washington, D.C. It is absolutely, and why so many people, the good part about a Correspondents' Dinner like that is it seems to bring together many factions on the left and the right. There are a lot of people on both sides of the political aisle that hate the thing for different reasons. how somebody hasn't stood up, some president hasn't stood up and said, maybe we just need to stop this. It seems like really weird that we get together and throw a party for ourselves, that we show up and do this. Remember, the media and politicians are supposed to have an adversarial relationship in this country. Supposed to. This kind of just shows, this one event every year shows that a lot of it is a show. What we see the other 364 days of the year is somewhat of a show. I add on to the fact that, add on the stat that was revealed recently that not one reporter working on Capitol Hill is a Republican. I don't know how they figured it out. I just saw that headline somewhere. But they go and chuckle it up. Meanwhile, the gross domestic product, the percentage, the growth rate is below 1%. Have more people on food stamps than ever. We have health care costs going through the roof. We have ISIS still existing in the Middle East, and they get together for one evening to tell each other how great they are. That would be. I'm going to be honest with you. If I were ever elected president, that would be the first thing that would stop. I would say, you know what? You want to have it? Fine. I'm not going to be there. I don't know what I'm going to be doing that night, but I won't be there. Because it's everything what is wrong with government and media in this country. Of course, nobody gets rid of it. You know why? Because it's a good way to schmooze and make sure that bad articles aren't written about you. That's why. That's why the politicians do it. And then the reporters don't want to stop it because then they get to, hang out with all the power people and kiss up to them. That's why. Can't some adult in that room just stand up and say, what the hell are we doing here? That's why I say, if it were up to me, I wouldn't be there. And if they still wanted to have it, as president, I would just make the casual suggestion, because I know I wouldn't be a king. I'd just make the casual suggestion. You know what would be real interesting? How about we get a live webcam showing soldiers at their posts in Afghanistan? I hear we have some more troops in Iraq right now. How about we put a live cam on what they're doing right now and then contrast that with what the senators and congressmen and reporters are doing over at this ball all dressed up? How about we contrast both of them? See, this is different to me than Hollywood, with everybody getting together for the Academy Awards, the Golden Globes, and all that. You know why? Because it's entertainment. It's movies. That's who those people are. They're the rich. They're the famous. What are you going to do? It's a private industry. If they want to hold an award show, then they can do that. And if they want to dress up and drive Porsches and show up in limousines, that's what they're going to do. Can't stop it if that's what they want to do with their money. But when it comes to elected leaders and people who actually have power, and then them schmoozing with the people who are supposed to... Remember what the media is. The media is supposed to be a representative for the citizens in the country. They are supposed to ask the questions that they think the average citizen would if that citizen had a job in media. They are representatives. And in turn, they're supposed to turn around and tell us what they find out. And, of course, that should be the truth. That's what's supposed to go on. Does that feel like what's going on? Do you think that makes, with a correspondence dinner, do you think it makes it less likely or more likely that we're going to get screwed? It seems like more likely we're going to get screwed. It seems. Whereas with entertainment, nobody should have such delusions. And it's the exact reason that I don't understand why so many conservatives worry about if this person or that person, that movie star, is conservative or not. It seems that maybe it's just a perception. It seems to me that conservatives get a lot more, ticked off about Hollywood and all the excess and parties and diamond rings and gold-plated shower curtains and things like that. They get much more ticked off about that than a correspondence dinner. Just a perception I have. I don't have any facts to base that on. Just me reading the internet for the last 10 years. Whereas the correspondence dinner, in my opinion, is an abomination. And I'd like to think if the Founding Fathers came back to life and they saw that going on, they'd be like, what? What are you doing? Ben Franklin, being that he wrote a newspaper, I would hope that he would come back and say, hey, and Ben Franklin liked a good party, if you don't know. I would hope that he would come back to life and say, what's going on here? What are you doing? Not enough of that, but nobody has the courage to say that, any prominent person, because why? Because all the prominent people get to go to the party. Correspondence dinner. It would be the first thing. We talk about all the problems of the world. If I was president, that would be the first thing that would end because I wouldn't show up. Let's move on to something else. I got an email from one of my listeners, must have been on Friday maybe, and I replied to him yesterday, and I thanked him for sending me that email, very thoughtful email, well-written. I should say a very well-written email, too. It's always nice to get ones that are easy to read. And he was responding to what I said last week about Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder and the rest of them going to these college campuses. And I told you I think it's just a big waste of time. And I've told you that I think that when these people do that, like Ann Coulter, the rest of them, the reason they go there is I don't think they show up for free. That's part of it. But I also think they know that it's going to generate some sort of YouTube video that's good for their marketing so they can continue to get speaking gigs. So it's really not about the spreading of conservatism. It's really just about guaranteeing their next gig, their next paycheck. I've convinced myself of that because I know that they're not going to any of these engagements and really changing any of these kids' minds. They're just not doing that. But there's another part to it, and I thought of it while I was replying to this email from one of my listeners, is that, see, the other problem, and I totally forgot about this last week, admittedly. There's also an issue of legitimacy that goes along with all of this. In that there is nothing respectable. There's no big congratulations that should go out when a bunch of people like Ann Coulter, with her education, her law degree, all of the books that she's sold, and all of the interviews that she's done, starts arguing with some 19-year-old that's going to some college on mommy or daddy's dime. That would be like, I'm not into boxing, but Floyd Mayweather boxing some featherweight, some intro-level featherweight, and then Floyd Mayweather being all happy that he did it. Look at me. Look how brave I am. Look at me. I'm going to go, when you are a person in a position, once again, I know how some of these people have acted recently since Donald Trump came on the scene, from Steven Crowder and Coulter. I get it. But in the bigger context of the education that they've had and all of the books they've sold and the leadership positions that they've put themselves in, and they've earned it, it seems weird that they would show up and argue with a bunch of nobodies. and actually get into arguments with these people. Because to me, when you do that, you're saying, as a conservative, that these people are actually worth arguing with. They're not. Because what comes out of it? Those kids can actually walk away and say, can you believe it that Ann Coulter actually just argued with me? I hate her. She's such a, words I can't say on this show. But they can go to their friends and say, I just had an argument with Ann Coulter and look what he did and we got it on YouTube and everything else. It does much more for them. In fact, it probably only emboldens them. It only makes them more confident that they should think the way they do. Not that they're going to walk away thinking, man, Ann Coulter really put me in my place. It's no different than trolls. It's the same thing. These kids that you see in those videos, in the Steven Crowder video, the most recent one, and older ones with Ann Coulter, where they wouldn't let her speak, Ben Shapiro, same thing, is these kids are nothing but real-life versions, brick-and-mortar trolls. They're no different than those people that you see on comment sections all over the internet, except for Ricochet.com, simply because you don't have them there because you have to pay to comment there. But we know what's the saying on the internet if you want to comment, don't feed the trolls. Somebody gets in there, seems to be tweaking you and everything. The worst thing you can do is try to argue with the person because they're not going away. They want you to respond. When you don't respond, they'll go away. If you can do it. And I know that takes some self-control. Well, all these kids are at these campuses, they're nothing but trolls. But here all these prominent conservatives are responding to them, giving them legitimacy. When you respond to somebody's argument, you give them legitimacy. And I remind you, these kids have no power. Most of them do not vote. Most of them just say this stuff just to tweak whoever is on stage. They do not form opinion in this country. They do not lead anybody. Half of them won't even think this way 15 years down the road. And the point is, they'll think something different. Why? Not because of Ann Coulter or Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder showing up. They'll figure it out, at least half of them, because they go into the real world and say, man, that socialism thing really sucks. Now, some of them won't. I don't know what you can do about that. But even in the 21st century, kids still do end up changing their minds somewhere down the road. Maybe it takes some scary situation in their life. Maybe they mature because they get married and have children. Who knows? Maybe they start taking a long, hard look at that paycheck they're getting and wonder where all that money's going. And then some of them start saying, you know what? I think I was wrong in college. They are not going to change their minds because of Ann Coulter, who goes up there and talks for an hour. They're not going to do it. That's not how it works. We know in our personal lives that's not how it works. We give people good advice. They don't take it. Why? Egos, stupidity, who the hell knows why. But somewhere down the road, it'll be like 10 years down the road, though, and then they'll have changed. It won't be because of you. It'll be usually because they figured it out on their own. That's what also drives me nuts. And as I was replying to this emailer, and I appreciate his email, I thought of that. This legitimacy question. If you think somebody is an idiot or something like that, in a situation like that, don't respond to them. Don't. If they're trying to be mature and adult-like and asking questions, yes, they're a leftist, but they're actually asking some legitimate question, and you can have a discussion, something like that, then it might be worth it. But not what you see in these videos. This is all about those people, those conservatives getting attention. Look at us. Look Because drama sells. Drama sells. They're just trying to get their clicks up. They're trying to get more Twitter followers. They're trying to get more views so they can get more speaking engagements. Doesn't matter if they're changing any minds. The fact is, if these people got paid on whether they changed any minds or not, their salary would be zero at any of these college campuses. Zero. They're better off going other, as I've told you, they're better off going to NAACP if they can get in engagements. They're better off going to Minority Business Owner Association meetings, things like that. But you know what? Those things don't generate drama. In the long run, it generates probably some talk about business and why conservatism is better for business, why conservatism is better for blacks. But it doesn't generate much drama. There's no shouting that goes on. And truth is, Ben Shapiro and Stephen Crowder, they show up in that Milo kook. They show up at these places because of the shouting, because of the F-bombs that are dropped, because they know it's coming and they show up anyway. And they don't do a dang thing for conservatism. Not a thing. So there's that point of it. You can't give these 19-year-old idiots legitimacy by hearing them out. That gives them the idea that they may just be right. Just like any 19-year-old on particularly any topic, you just let it go in one ear and out the other. One more thing before I go. I was thinking about Donald Trump. He can't even get this right. He said last week that if Hillary were not a woman, she would be getting only 5% of the vote. I guess he believes that if she were a man, a Democrat, running the way she has, that she would have had to have dropped out a long time ago. If you're only going to get 5% of the vote in all these states, then she wouldn't be around anymore. See, he even gets that wrong. He cannot even get that right. Because the truth is that she's not doing exceptionally well with women. See, I happen to think the opposite. If she were a guy, she'd be doing better. Whereas Donald Trump seems to think if she was a guy, she'd be doing worse. Where all the statistics, all these polls that have been done show what I think is true and don't say what Trump thinks is true. It's like he gets everything 180 degrees out of phase. I say black, he says white. I say up, he says down. I say sky, he says grass. And in this case, he says woman, I say man. I've told you that if she were a guy, she would have won the nomination. Bernie Sanders would be a faint memory by now. But it's because she's a woman that she's having problems. A couple reasons. I've told you, a lot of Democrat guys look at her and say, kind of reminds me of my ex-wife. And when it comes to women, I think there's a few too many Democrat women. And granted, I don't want to sound sexist, but the point is, you know what? Women can be somewhat catty. They can certainly want to bring women. Hey, there's not a group bringing women down more than other women in this country. And that's something that a few women talk about. But most women just want to talk about how men are trying to keep women down. You know what? There's a lot of women trying to keep women down too. And that's a little bit of what is going on here as well. And if she were a guy, if it was some other guy doing what Hillary Clinton's been doing, he'd be doing a lot better. So I totally disagree with Donald Trump on that. She'd be getting not 5% of the vote. She'd be getting 85% of the vote if she was a guy. But I got to go. EdwardDentzel.com is where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. Also at Podbean, Podomatic, YouTube, and SoundCloud. edwarddentzel.com/book. You can download for free the first chapter of my next book called The Comebacks. Email me, edwarddentzel@reagan.com, Twitter, Dentzel Domain, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.